When I was a headmaster in the last 5 years, I had an increasing number of fathers, I'm sorry, men, but it was fathers, come in and say, "Headmaster, the first thing I want to know is that I am John's best friend." And a slight alarm bell, because actually John has his friends, and their friends perform a slightly different function to what the father should. Because the great thing about being a father, or indeed a mother, is you have this massive thing called unconditional love. And I think it's the confusion between loving your child more than you love anything on earth and friendship. And the big danger is that as the person who has the unconditional love, you can actually set the boundaries for the child, whereas the friend's going to walk out the door. Actually, sometimes, if they're told things they don't like, it's a completely different relationship. And it was really sparked off for me by the story told by a friend of mine who's a headmaster of a junior school. And he had a father, sorry, but it was a father, come in and say to him, "Do you think you could tell my son," and he was about 7, I think, "not to look at screens, phone or iPad, actually at the dining table?" And the headmaster, "OK, you know, more." I said, "Well, we can't get him to eat because he's looking at the screen all the time. So we've had to bring Granny down from Huddersfield to actually feed him like a baby." So the headmaster sort of swallowed a bit and said, "Why not just say to him, no screens at the table?" "Oh, I can't do that," said the father. "You see, it might spoil our relationship. He's my best friend."
And that, I mean, that is crazy, isn't it? That does seem crazy behaviour. I think a lot of parents, parents are full of guilt. You're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't at the moment. And I think the one thing that we hear all the time, and particularly with social media in this world, is to keep lines of communication open with your children. The most important thing you can do is have a child that can talk to you about anything. So therefore, I read that, I think we all read that, where you need to be friends with them on a certain level so they're not fearful of telling you something that they might feel will get them into trouble.
But then again, the child being free to tell you everything doesn't mean to say you have to agree with everything. And by sharing a lot of the things, the child is actually testing to see what is acceptable and what isn't. And I mean, the fact is, we talk about learning taking place in schools. I mean, to heck with that. 90% of a child's learning takes place within the family, because what they're learning in school, they're learning facts, GCSE. What they're learning in the family is human relationships.
Yes.
They're learning what passes, what doesn't pass, what's OK and what doesn't.
So you'd be denying them of a huge part of their education.
And also, you mustn't actually, I mean, how many of us wouldn't willingly give up that wonderful moment of moaning to your friends about your parents? I mean, it's one of the rites of passage, isn't it? It's one of the best things ever. Yeah. But also, the other thing I have to say is that I think being a parent is incredibly difficult. Being a child is very difficult. And the world is increasingly full of boring old men like me who lecture people. So what I have to say from the outset is I have made every single mistake in parenting.
Right, OK.
So nobody's perfect.
So picking you up on that then, if you in your own words, as sort of a boring guy, school teacher, and you've made all sorts of mistakes, you know, and you also said that parenting is not easy. There isn't a manual. So aren't you just sending us all on a massive guilt trip?
I think what I'm actually doing is actually asking people to ignore experts like me, really. I still think that parental instinct is the strongest instinct on earth. Yeah. And it's interesting, I mean, as a headmaster...
Are you backing down from what you said, then?
Not at all, because, I mean, I think I have the right to say what I say, as a parent has the right to say. What I think I'm saying is that increasingly we've gone into the world of the expert. And in some way, to me, the expert is the parent. You know your child far better than anybody else. And I think the key thing is I have met time after time a parent who you would look at from the outside and think wasn't perhaps the ideal parent. But in their instinct with their children,
it's not necessarily the case.
So if I do what I want to do with my children, then everything you said and the article and the interviews that you've done, and you sort of pull the rug out from underneath all of that, then, because you.
No, what I'm saying is,
as a parent, I want to be best friend to my child, so therefore I should be able to.
I would only offer one tiny bit of advice: actually distinguish between friendship and love, because they're not the same thing. And that's where the mistake is made. You can love that child more than you love anything on earth, as we do. You don't have to be their best friend to do it.
It's part of the problem that we're all working longer hours. Both parents are working, not in all cases, but a lot of people find this situation when they come home, they're having less time with their children, so they want to make that time, that quality time, nice time, and not get into battle.
I think one of the nightmares is the incredibly well-meaning parent who comes home early from work, i.e. 7 o'clock, and the child has been sort of with somebody all day, then suddenly at 7 o'clock, you know, there's Mozart in one ear, there's Dr. Seuss in the other, and the child goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and then at 8 o'clock they're meant to go to sleep again, you know. But the real problem to me is actually, dare I say it, the social media. I mean, I get absolutely incandescent when people talk about snowflake children. Our children are having to cope, in my opinion, with a harder world than any children have had to cope with. Pardon?
Explain snowflake.
Snowflake is sort of children are soft and wimpy and mollycoddled. Are they, heck? I mean, these children can't be alone anymore. This is what we've changed with the social media. You cannot be alone as a child. You take that media, you take your friends, so-called, back into the bedroom with you. And I think back to my childhood, and I couldn't even comment on yours, of course, but I mean, you're having to answer all sorts of... I mean, I have the hugest respect for parents, which is... But friendship with your children comes when they're in their 20s and 30s.
And then you can be a friend.
And it's brilliant. It is absolutely stunning.